Story 1. I once had a nap on my couch a few hours before I had to go to work. I woke up, checked the time, and started to get ready for work. I realized I was still dreaming. I woke up again, checked the time. It was a little later than the first time. Again, I started to get ready for work. I was still dreaming. I went through that 5 or 6 times until each time I woke up I was panicking since I didn't know if I was awake or still sleeping, but I still got up and started to get ready for work. The last wake-up cycle, I would have been late for work. Creepiest dream I have ever had, even more than my sleep paralysis. Story 2. I could see my house from my elementary school's soccer field. One time during recess, I thought I could see my mom in her bedroom window, and I was waving at her. It didn't quite look like her, but who else could it possibly be? I thought it was strange that she was home because both my parents were usually at work when my siblings and I were in school. When I got home from school, I told my mom I tried to wave at her during recess, but she said she got home just a few minutes before my siblings and I did. I just said, "Oh, never mind. I'm just kidding." But the more I think about it, there was some lady in my parents' bedroom window that was strangely opening and closing the curtains for several minutes. Story 3. I went to New Brunswick for a week to help my mom empty out my grandfather's house after he died. I don't live near the ocean, but he lived across the street, and I took advantage of that by spending hours every day looking for seashells. I had started a small collection on the front porch. On one of the days, we had an estate sale where over 100 people came throughout the day. An overly friendly older couple introduced themselves to me, saying that they were my grandfather's friends. They mentioned that they saw the shells on the porch, and the lady said that she also collects shells and I should come to her house to grab some. I awkwardly laughed and walked away. When I came back around the front of the house, they were talking to my mother's husband about how I should go with them because they lived right down the street. My mother's husband immediately agreed on my behalf, and I felt weird saying no at this point, so I just went with them. It turns out their house, right down the street, was actually about 40 minutes away by car. As soon as we hopped in the car, they quickly started asking a bunch of questions like what grade I was in, what extracurricular activities I participated in, whether I was a party girl or a studious girl, and so on. I eventually had to interrupt them to tell them that I was actually 20 years old and not in school. After that, they went from super bubbly and friendly to completely quiet for the rest of the ride. I went to their house, the lady filled a small bag with shells, and they quietly and awkwardly dropped me back off. It was a very strange experience. Story 4. When I was 14, I was walking in my town, which had no more than 100 people in it. I noticed that a former neighbor who had moved away parked at the park. I assumed he was visiting someone and parked there. I walked home, which was like a 3-minute walk from the park to my yard, and he pulled up beside me. I was about 5 steps from my yard, and he tried to convince me to get in his car to see his nephew, who was my friend. When I told him no, he told me he would give me a ride all the way to my house, as my yard was fairly large. But it was like a 2-minute tops from there to my house. I kept telling him no, and he kept getting angrier. He grabbed something from the passenger seat and tried to grab the door handle. At the same time, another neighbor came out to see what was going on. He drove off so fast. He kidnapped another girl a couple of months later at knife point. I didn't tell anyone because it was well known he was a creep among the girls in town. I didn't even process that he was trying to kidnap me until my grandmother told me he was arrested for kidnapping a girl. Then I felt so guilty at that time that I didn't mention it to anyone. Story 5. A year or two ago, I stumbled upon a discussion forum that was populated by quite a few members, but the posts were absolutely nonsensical. They commented on each other's posts as if they all understood what they were talking about. I kind of lurked for a little while, then got bored and forgot about it. A few weeks later, I was talking to someone via chat, and I mentioned the discussion forum to them. Out of nowhere, I started getting chat requests from the members of that forum. I accepted a few of the chats, and they were speaking to me very aggressively, with similar gibberish that filled their forum. I blocked them all and never heard from them again. I don't know what it was all about, but it made my skin crawl. Story 6. I was 21 and was walking from one work building to another. It was maybe a 5-minute walk. It was about 10 p.m. A silver minivan with stuffed animals lining the windshield pulled up, rolled down the window, slowly followed next to me, and asked if I needed a ride. Being 21 and already annoyed with my job, I just answered, no. He kept asking question after question, and I ignored every single one. Finally, he asked my name. I stopped walking, he stopped, and I just stared at him. I literally just stared at him for about 2 solid minutes. Then I took out my phone and snapped a picture of him with flash so it purposely wasn't discreet. He drove off. A week later, the same thing happened to another female coworker. She told him to go away and called the police. I gave them the picture I had taken, not sure if anything ever came of it. Later, we all found out there was a string of sexual assaults happening between the buildings, so all employees were told not to walk that path anymore. I never found out if it was that guy, but the discomfort it gave me was indescribable. Story 7. One day, I heard my dad call my name. It was weird, but not exactly unusual. He lives nearby and comes over when he needs something, though he usually knocks instead of just yelling my name. I got up and checked outside, but I didn't see his truck. I walked around the outside of the house but couldn't find him. I heard him call my name again with some urgency, as if he was getting impatient, but he was not there. I could see his house from my front yard, and I realized his truck was not there either. I grabbed my phone and called him, but he didn't answer. This actually freaked me out because he is great about answering the phone. I had called him at midnight as well as 5 in the morning, and he answered every time. He said my name again, and I didn't even think about it. I grabbed my keys, got in the van, and took off down the highway. There was a crossroads less than a mile from the road, 2 roads crossing, for possible ways to go, including back the way I came. I turned down this little back road, and after 3 miles, I came over this hill, and his truck was lying upside down on the side of the road. He was alive, but out of it. It turned out he had a mild concussion, his phone still in his pocket. I let him believe it was just a weird coincidence that I felt like going for a drive that day. Story 8. After my husband died of bone cancer at 50, I had a day of grieving that was so severe I went to bed crying. When I tried to get up, I found to my horror I could not walk. I had to use the bathroom desperately, but I seriously could not walk. I ended up using the trash can. It scared me so much. Before, I had always thought I was quite stoic and that psychosomatic issues were nonsense. I went back to sleep and woke up hours later and could walk. And, of course, there was waste in the trash can. I researched it and found it is not that uncommon during the grieving process to suffer physically in a way that mirrors the ailments of the person who died. For the next year, I kept crutches under the bed just in case it happened again. Interestingly, after my mother died of Alzheimer's disease, my father had days of being very forgetful and confused that resolved in time. Story 9. Shortly after I left school, I got a job working night shifts at a cinema in the city. I remember I was on the bus going home. The only other person on the bus was a man somewhere in his 40s or 50s who started talking to me. I was 16 at the time. He kept asking me about what I was up to and what I had been doing during the day. I lied, saying I was a waiter working for a local restaurant. He then asked if I had just left school, to which I foolishly said yes. He then said, "You seem quite agitated." "I am only trying to be friendly." By this point, I was becoming quite paranoid, and after he started smoking on the bus, I decided to get off the bus despite being 6 stops away from my house and walked the rest of the way back home. Story 10. When I was probably 10, my mom and I were cleaning out my closet while my younger brother, who was about 2 to 3 years old, was in the kitchen playing. We lived in the countryside, and it was just the 3 of us in the house. I heard a man say, "They let you play in here all alone, boy?" coming from the direction of the kitchen. I turned to my mom and asked, "Who was that?" To which she responded, "You heard that too?" We ran into the kitchen, and there was no one in sight other than my brother. All the windows and doors were closed and locked. When we asked my brother who it was, he just said, "That man." It is still a mystery to this day, and I will never forget that voice. Story 11. I used to have what I later learned to be exploding head syndrome. This mainly happened if I took an afternoon nap. After an otherwise peaceful sleep, I would be woken up by one of 2 noises. The first sounded like a bomb detonating in my room or just outside the house. The other was the sound of someone screaming as if they were being gruesomely murdered. Another strange detail is that it was usually the sound of my own voice doing the screaming. Story 12. When I was 9, I traveled down to Mexico for my sister's wedding. I had incredibly blonde hair that fell past my back. It was absolutely stunning. My brother-in-law is a native, and he, my sister, mom, and I went out shopping. My brother-in-law had gone to another section of the store, and my mother had gotten distracted, so I think I just ran to another aisle. I did notice that two men were standing fairly close to me, and when I switched aisles, they did as well. They were talking to themselves, and I had no idea what they were saying, so I just kept looking at all of the trinkets. My brother-in-law suddenly hurried over to me and escorted me out of the store quickly. He put me in the car, and my sister walked over to him. I heard her ask what had happened. He said that he heard the two men conversing in Spanish, that they wanted to take me and sell me. For the rest of the trip, I remember every adult around me being weirdly protective. I was mad about it at the time. I had no clue what that meant until many years later, and then I was like, damn, I was almost trafficked. My brother-in-law is a native Mexican, but he is incredibly white, with platinum blonde hair and almost translucent skin. We all were white. I think they assumed that no one in our group could speak Spanish, and so I think they were less guarded than they would have been normally, and he overheard them. Thank God for my brother-in-law. Story 13. I was 14 years old and was babysitting for one of my dad's friends. He still wasn't home by 1 a.m., and I ended up falling asleep on the couch. I had a really strange dream that I was floating above my body, looking down, and the boy I was babysitting was standing over me, stroking my hair. When I woke up, the man was home and was literally standing over me, stroking my hair. The whole thing still gives me the creeps even more than 30 years later. Story 14. Creepiest thing that has happened to me. I've told like half my friends this though. Back in my junior year of college, I think it was about a week before school started back up. My friend was a residential advisor and he realized he forgot to make a bunch of posters that needed to go up tomorrow. It was midnight and he didn't have a car, but I did. So we went to the local Walmart and it was exactly what you envision a Walmart at midnight back in 2012. Random people stalking the aisles. The ones you did spot had hoodies on like they didn't want you knowing about their late-night ice cream sandwich cravings. We got to the arts and crafts area of the store, and were just picking random items out. Suddenly, a random lady poked her head into the aisle we were in and stared at us intently. She looked like skin and bones with wrinkles across her face. She suddenly said, "Excuse me," and I thought, oh boy, and she asked about some of the products. I said, "Sorry, we don't work here, so we don't really know." And she just went, "Oh," and kept staring at us. At this point, we just decided what we grabbed was enough. Forget the glitter. We got to the checkout line before the time of self-checkout, and this same lady was right behind us. I was just going, trying to avoid eye contact. We checked out and left, and my friend and I were joking about it, saying, "Guess that's the Walmart After Dark experience." While we were in the parking lot, I noticed a large black van with no windows parked oddly, and it was on and running. I elbowed my friend again, laughed, and said, "Watch out, they're gonna kidnap you." And we laughed about it. But we hopped into my trusty Honda Accord and off we zoomed along. However, as I was leaving the parking lot, I noticed the black van started following us. I shrugged and thought to myself, hey, sometimes people are going in similar directions. But after hitting 2 different stoplights and making a left turn, they were still following us. I was semi-freaking out, and my friend noticed. I remembered a trick, which was to keep making left turns to see if the person behind you is actually following you. I made 3 left turns, and they were still following us. At this point, I was legitimately thinking, forget this, and began driving toward a police station on campus. However, the black van knew that we knew and sped off to who knows where. I was just relieved it was over. My friend was convinced we were going to get mugged or much worse. We got back to the campus parking lot and we could see our dorm. There was a single light in our parking lot that was about 50 feet away from the door we were heading to. We could see hope. We were almost home. As we crossed from the pavement of the parking lot to the grass, out of the bushes, some random guy in a hoodie came out like he was a reverse Simpson. This guy looked like he had been tweaking. I could see the craziness in his eyes. He just walked up and said, "Hey guys, you got a phone I could use?" I instantly said, "Oh, sorry, man. I don't have my phone on me." But my friend, right as he was going to say something, his phone just had to go off at that moment. He closed his eyes and let out the loudest, but also silent sigh I had ever seen. We were both thinking the same thing. This guy is going to stab us if we don't get along with him. My friend reached into his pocket and began to hand over the phone when suddenly, red and blue sirens flashed behind us. Our heads all darted over, and we saw a police officer get out of his car. At this moment, I didn't know how to read this situation. Were we saved? Was a gun about to be pulled out? Was I just doomed? The officer spoke up and said, "How's everyone doing tonight?" My friend and I just awkwardly smiled and said, "Oh, we're just trying to go back into the dorm." The officer focused on the man from the bushes and said, "Hey, I'd like to chat with you real quick. We got a report about a robbery that matched your description, so we just want to talk." The man paused and then said, "But I need to make a phone call," as he wiggled my friend's phone lightly in the air. The officer replied, "Don't worry. I've got a phone you can use after. Why don't you go ahead and hand that back?" I was holding my breath. My friend was frozen, and the guy was just standing there menacingly. Finally, he nodded and gave the phone back. We said goodnight and Power walked to the dorm door. We got in, closed the door, got away from the windows, and then lost our minds. We were laughing either out of joy or madness. I told my friend I was never driving him after midnight again. He owed me food after this. So yeah, forget all of that noise. Story 15. Had a man follow me into my apartment building. We had a slow old elevator that broke a lot, but it was working that day. As it slowly ascended, I could hear hard, fast steps on the stairs. As I exited the elevator in the dark, the light timed out because of the slow elevator, I felt something grab at my feet. I ran around the corner and up the last flight of stairs, as the elevator did not go up to the very top floor. I waited at the top of the last few steps. I could hear breathing that wasn't mine and the slow, deliberate crunch of a shoe slowly connecting with the tile. My eyes adjusted to the dark, and I could see a shadow peek and very cautiously emerge from around the wall. Once I could see the full shadowy outline, I kicked with full force with my new rocks into what seemed like the head. At that point, my elderly neighbor opened her door to let me know that I was making too much noise. I pushed her into her apartment, closed her door, and ran to my door. I woke my flatmate and told him to lock the balcony doors, as it was easy to access his balcony from the roof. He went into the hallway and found my broken jewelry and a little splatter of blood, but no person or anything else. I had to apologize to the neighbor. She didn't believe me and thought I was just being loud and aggressive. This was in 2004 in Nice, France. Story 16. When I was a teenager, I went home late at night, and it seemed that someone was behind me. As I was trying to unlock the door as fast as possible, I turned around and behind me there was a fat old man, naked from the waist down, jumping up and down. Story 17. A friend dropped me off at my apartment one night, and where I lived, the interstate was about 3 blocks from my house. There was an awful accident involving a semi-truck and another car. So after she dropped me off, I thought I would walk up the street to take a closer look. As I was walking back to my apartment, I noticed a man walking behind me. Fast, like he was trying to catch up to me. I sped up a bit and then so did he. My heart was racing. I thought to just cross to the other side of the street to see if he followed. But then I thought, what if he does? I don't know where it came from, but I stopped dead in my tracks, turned around, and turned right toward him. He kept walking right by me, but I stared him down the whole time. Story 18. One summer night, my sister, cousin, and I tried to go out into the countryside about half an hour from where we lived to steal a road sign with our family's name on it. We didn't have the right tools, so we decided to drive back home and grab them. On our way back, my sister and I swear we saw a car stopped at a stop sign a few hundred meters down the road that wasn't actually there when we got to that spot. Our cousin was in the back and she said she wasn't paying attention. We couldn't make out exactly what the car looked like, but we both agreed it was a vehicle moving in the direction of the stop sign and then coming to a stop. The view was obstructed by corn for a second as we got close, and then the car was nowhere to be seen. We both agreed there was a strange luminous glow to the headlights too. It felt too weird. So when we got home, we went to our room instead of looking for the tools right away, and suddenly my car alarm started going off. I was right by the window and saw within a second, but there was nobody outside messing with my car. Then, within literally a minute, the light bulb in our room blew out. Just too weird, so we never messed with the signs again. Story 19. It is not supernatural or anything, but when I was 5 or 6 years old, my stepfather would sometimes stand next to my bed and tell me how he wanted to kill me. He would just stand there, looking at me and describe what he wanted to do to me. Occasionally, he would touch my face, my neck, and my shoulders, and just let his imagination fly. He never acted like it had happened in the morning. My mom knew he was violent. He was violent toward both of us, but she never knew he would do this to me. I have never told anyone. Story 20. Someone flashed me once. It happened so fast, and I was in so much shock that I froze. The guy ran off, though, so I couldn't even see his face. Story 21. My then boyfriend and I had just moved to Las Vegas together for his new job. We were both 21 and had never lived outside of California. We were staying at an extended stay hotel behind the strip while we looked for a place to rent. I needed headphones, so I walked down the street to the store by myself to get some. I left the store, and on a little street that turned onto the main road I was walking on, a huge man in a blacked-out Cadillac pulled up, rolled his window down, and asked if I needed a ride somewhere. I just looked at him and said, "No, thanks. I'm good," and put my headphones on. I kept walking, and about a block later, I saw him again. He rolled his windows down again. I noticed his massive watch and all his rings. I saw that his back seat was so dark from the tint, and he was wearing a really nice button-up shirt, but his smile was slimy. He again asked if I needed a ride, and I just tried to be polite and said, "No, thank you. I'm just right here," and kept walking. He just said, "Whatever, girl. You're lost," and drove away. I was so naive. Looking back, I know for a fact he was involved in human trafficking, and I just got lucky. Story 22. I'm not going to be able to sleep because of some of you. Anyways, I once had a coworker who used to ask where I would hide if there was an active shooter in the building. While staring me down with his pupils dilating, I would laugh and say I wouldn't tell him because then he would take that into consideration in case of an apocalypse. It snapped him out of that trance, and he would laugh and say maybe. That happened a few times. When he would ask what I would do if held at gunpoint, I would have to say, "I have already been. It wouldn't be new to me." And he would get disappointed and start laughing, saying how it's a joke and everyone finds that question funny. Story 23. When I was in the hospital last year after I had a heart attack, I woke one morning and, clear as day, my dad was standing at the foot of my bed. My dad died over a decade ago. He didn't say anything, he just stood there. One of the things the nurses kept asking me was if I was seeing anything that wasn't there. I always said no because I had no idea what it meant to see my deceased dad like that. Story 24. In my old apartment, I was woken up from a deep sleep by a car outside. When I looked down, my entire right leg was raised up. I wasn't under a blanket and couldn't feel my muscles holding my leg up. As soon as I looked at it, I felt it being forcefully shoved from above, as if someone was slamming it down back onto the bed. I don't believe in ghosts, but I still can't explain that. Story 25. Getting chased by a naked homeless man. I had just left a concert and I had parked my car blocks away in a paid parking lot. As I got closer, that's when I spotted the naked man on the opposite sidewalk. He was completely exposed, really fit, and seemed to be in some sort of a manic episode because he was mumbling nonsense while also screaming randomly. My car was just so close to him, and there was no way to get around. I saw two men walking towards me, and the naked man was already bothered by their presence as they walked on the other side of the sidewalk. I knew the chances of me being the unlucky person who triggered a scene, like running into an enemy in a Pokemon game, were high. Sure enough, I felt his gaze, turned to look at him, and he started sprinting towards me like an infected character in a zombie game. Now I was sprinting towards my car. Those two men who passed by, they saw me and did nothing. I was now in the parking lot, hiding behind cars, trying to duck down until I reached mine. It was like a scene out of a horror movie. I was trying to make myself small and not be seen. It was also dark outside. The minute I reached my car, I took off at full acceleration, heading home. The creepy part is that a week later, someone on the same street was attacked, and they didn't find the suspect. I saw it on the news. Story 26. In college, some friends and I were very drunk and decided we should go get food from the local 24-hour Mexican place. It was around 3 in the morning, and obviously no one on campus was alive at that time, so the campus was dead. Except for the man dressed in an all-white suit. This man kept following us, although my friends were too drunk to notice or care, but I kept my eye on him. There was only one girl in our group, and I told her just in case. About halfway there, I turned a corner and waited for the man so I could tell him to go away. I was waiting there, and here he slinked, keeping in the shadows. I told him, "I have seen you following us. Just get lost." He looked me dead in the eyes, cornered me, and said, "I wasn't following them. I was following you." I was so confused. I thought he was hitting on me, so I said, "I'm not." By this time, my friends finally realized I was not there, so they yelled my name. The man looked up for 1 second. I skirted by him, jumped over the railing, and just ran. I didn't want to know why a grown man would be outside of a college campus at 3 in the morning on a Thursday wearing an all-white suit. Either that, or that time I went into an abandoned warehouse with 4 of the most muscular men from Jamaica I have ever seen to buy my Xbox 360. Story 27. I have told this story here a couple of times, but I kept it to myself for a long time. When I was a teenager, I was doing some sightseeing in Paris and heading back to my hostel via the metro. I was followed by 2 men who tried to engage me in conversation and took a photo of me. When I got off at the transfer station, one of the men followed me, grabbed me from behind, and started kissing me. I froze. He started leading me onto a train, and I followed, gently complying. Then, when the doors were about to close, I broke free, bolted out the door, and back onto the platform. Looking back, it is pretty clear to me and terrifying how close I was to being kidnapped, likely by human traffickers. Story 28. My mom had a stack of old board games in the closet, among them a Ouija board. My younger sister and I played with it in the game room one night, and we were the last 2 people up. I sent her off to bed, boxed up the game, and put it back in the closet so there would not be trouble with my obsessive-compulsive disorder neat freak mom. I am the early riser in the family, and as I shuffled into the kitchen the next morning, the Ouija board was set up at my place at the breakfast table with the planchette in the dead center. The game room closet was closed, and the box for the game was still in the closet. Story 29. So this isn't nearly as creepy as actual dangerous situations people are describing here, but nevertheless. You know how when you close your eyes, you can still see a blend of color, known as phosphenes for those who don't know what I'm referring to? Well, I started focusing on them last year when trying to sleep as a way to distract myself. Similar to counting sheep, but I'm just making sense of odd shapes. All goes well, but then one night, out of absolutely nowhere, the colors lined up to create a surprisingly detailed face staring at me. Probably only lasted a fraction of a second at most, but it just creeped me out. A couple of days later, it happened again, but it was a lot less detailed, with only 2 different tones of color shaping it in a way that resembled an old black and white photo with really harsh lighting obscuring the face. Thankfully, it hasn't happened since, but there was definitely a moment when it occurred where I thought, nice. I can't even shut my eyes without something creepy going on. Story 30. I was sleeping when my brother took a picture of me. I was wearing underwear, but he did so regardless. The only reason I found out was because he accidentally sent it to our family group chat. He still had the pictures on his phone. I was 11. Story 31. I lived alone. I was walking down a bare hallway with nothing in it. No shelves, no hanging photos, just the hallway and carpet. Movement caught my eye, and I looked down and saw a quarter rolling across the carpet, which stopped right at my feet. I'm sure there is a perfectly rational explanation for it, even if I have no idea what it was, but at the time, my heart just stopped cold. On a more humorous note, one late night I was out running in the dark. I happened to be doing zombies run at the time and was running from zombies. You know how you get a sudden premonition there is something evil behind you, and you turn around and there is nothing there, and then you laugh at yourself? Well, I turned around, and there is a large, sinister creature lunging at me to wrestle my soul to hell. Okay, it was the world's friendliest golden retriever who thought we were having a marvelous game of chase, but it took my brain a moment to process that, during which time I nearly frightened myself. Story 32. I sometimes take naps in the afternoon. I just lay on my bed and have a relaxing little nap. I sometimes feel like I am entering a state in which I am half awake, half asleep, and I often hear breathing around me then. It is literally like someone is right behind me, breathing or sometimes walking around in my bedroom. I always feel like I am more awake in these moments, and at some point when it gets louder and feels like it is getting closer, I decide to lash out behind me in order to surprise whoever sneaked up on me. Of course, no one is there, but in these moments I can clearly hear the breathing and even think clearly. I have never found anything online about this. Story 33. One time when I was around 13 or 14, I was feeling pretty sick. I got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and urinated what looked like straight blood. I had not eaten any beets or any of those foods that change the color. It was extremely painful, and it smelled like blood. I was dazed and scared, but feeling very unwell, so I went back to bed. Nothing came of it, and it never happened again. I never told anyone. Story 34. I was about 12 and resting on the couch. A small lamp was directly in my face. The light was nice and warm, so I looked right at the bulb. My vision was fully white, not painful at all, so I just closed my eyes and fell asleep. I woke up looking directly into the white light. However, I opened my eyes to see a pure black silhouette peering over me, not standing near me looking down. I mean, it was hunched over, inches from my face. I saw the black shape of a head and neck connected to the body. I blinked after 3 seconds of staring at this, and it disappeared. Story 35. In 2018, my family called the maintenance worker to our house to inspect a leaking washing machine. I was 12 at the time, and I was naive when it came to fully trusting everyone we let into our house. The maintenance man was doing a good job throughout, found the problem, and fixed it promptly without complicating anything. I went back to the living room to finish my homework, only to realize I left a textbook in my bedroom. It was then I heard the noise of cabinets opening and closing from my bedroom, and it was already after he was paid for his work. When I opened my bedroom door, I caught the man sniffing my tights. I did not know what to do as I was in shock and disgust, but I calmly told him to leave. The man was so embarrassed he left behind his toolbox. My mom was home at the time and in the kitchen preparing dinner, and I did not want to tell on him knowing she would freak out. The man got his tools back, which my parents believed to this day was a result of him being in a hurry. Story 36. My neighbor paid me to watch his dog, take him outside, feed him, give him water, and play with him all while he was on vacation. I was 13 and, like everyone else, I loved that dog. On day 3, I heard him cough in the basement. It was a short, stifled cough, but it was definitely him. He used to sit in a lawn chair that faced my bedroom window. Story 37. Look, I told a couple of people, but I don't talk about it to a lot of people because it makes me sound completely insane. But at night, around 2 a.m., my fire alarm goes off. I didn't realize it had been replaced with a voice alarm. So a soft woman's voice just says, "Fire." Creepy enough, but whatever. I look and nothing. I can't find a fire. Nothing is on. No smell. Nothing. Not even steam from the shower. I go to bed. 10 minutes later, fire. I get up again. No fire. Nothing. Just my fire alarm's lights flashing. No smoke. No steam. Nothing is on. Then, and this is where I lost my mind. I swear I hear, "Didn't you hear me?" I said fire. The absolute shock. I look around and swear there's a see-through old lady in the corner of my room. There's a fire. The non-existent figment of my imagination yells at me. Oh, no, I'm dreaming. Yes, that's it. I go back to bed, hiding under my covers. Forget this. There's a fire. Here again. Finally, I'm just like, whatever. I'm going insane, it's fine. And I get up, look that ghost in the non-existent eyes and say, and what am I supposed to do about it? Call emergency services and tell them a ghost told me there's a fire. And that's when I hear fire trucks, dozens of them going down the block. Oh, good. They're here. My imaginary ghost yells before going through my wall and following the sirens. Yep, that's it. I'm done. I'm out. I take 2 anxiety medications and go to sleep. I am not dealing with this. No way. I heard and saw all of this. I'm hallucinating. Nope. This is all in my head. I am not addressing this at what is now 2:30 a.m. The next morning, I tell my partner about the weird things I experienced the night before. I asked them if they heard the fire alarm, and they hadn't. For fun, and I can't believe my partner did this, they look up if there was a fire last night. There was a fire, 3 blocks away. An old woman died while on the phone trying to call the fire department. There was a photo. It was the old lady I saw, wrinkle for wrinkle. It was my ghost. Story 38. I was at a coworker's apartment partying and went upstairs to use the bathroom. Nobody else was upstairs as only the bedrooms and bathroom were up there. I came out to some guy standing outside the door. He didn't let me pass and said something about looking for his blunt that he left in there. I said I hadn't seen it and knew nothing about it. He insisted he had left it in there and I probably took it. I gestured to my outfit, which was tight clothing with no pockets, and said, "Well then, where was I hiding it?" He said, "I think I am going to have to search you." I seriously thought I was about to be assaulted. I told him again I didn't have it and he needed to go ask his friends who took it. I pushed past him and went back downstairs. I probably should have told someone, but didn't want to kill the mood. He came over when I was leaving and tried to apologize, but I just looked at him and walked out without a word. What an awful person. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.